Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Steve Aldana. I'm the CEO of WellSteps. I wanted to welcome you to this month's webinar on biometric screening done right. About 6 years ago, I was working with a mining company in the Midwest, and their CEO was telling us all about their wellness program and how they do biometric screening with everybody. And every single year, they screen all 900 employees for their full blood lipids and their full blood profiles. And he pulled out these charts, and he showed me these great charts that showed his individual blood work that had been tested every year for 9 years. I remember looking at it, and I remember looking at his cholesterol, which was actually high, and every year he would test high, 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 high. And at that time, it dawned on me that there were groups that were doing biometric screening horribly wrong. It was an enormous expense for this company to do this every year. And the deal was nothing was changing. They were just gathering data every year on every employee, but with no intervention. They weren't carefully selecting who to do it. So Troy and I had visited about how to do wellness with biometric screening and how to do it right versus how to do it wrong. So I want to welcome you. We've got 800 people registered for today's webinar, so obviously there's some interest here. All of the phones have been muted. Your microphones have been muted. You can all see our screen, but there's a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. On the control panel, there's a questions section. Feel free to type any question about any part of this webinar. We're going to do Q&A at the very end, and the more questions we get, the better the interaction is, and we walk away with some better understanding of this topic. Also, at wellsteps.com, on the webinars link, these slides have already been posted. So not only has Dr. Adams put together a great slide deck, but also there are some really good ancillaries, some PDFs that we've created to help you understand some of the legal aspects of doing biometric screening, and these are in English, and I think they're brilliant. But those have been posted, again, at wellsteps.com at the webinars link. You can get those handouts, and you can get a copy of the slide deck. We have Ryan Isaacson, Operations Manager. He's behind the scenes answering questions, as will I. And with that, I want to introduce you all to Dr. Troy Adams, who's the Chief Operating Officer at WellSteps. He got his PhD at University of Texas at Austin. He's been my partner at WellSteps for about 10 years. He's the glue that holds all of this technology together to make all of this work. He's also what I consider a lawyer in training, because he's the one that dives in and interprets all of the rulings and all of the EEOC rulings and all of the HIPAA and ERISA and GINA. And Troy doesn't know it yet, but he's halfway to a Juris Doctorate. And we appreciate his hard work. He's going to share some of that with you today. Troy, welcome, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Steve. I felt like I was being punked there for a little bit. I promise you I am not halfway to it. I'm not even a tenth of the way to a Juris Doctorate. I have absolutely no interest. It's just that by default, somehow all this legal stuff falls to me. And I am delighted to be here. And I was actually, when I checked the numbers for this webinar, I was shocked, beyond shocked to see that about 800 of you had registered for this webinar because it's on biometric screening. But it is incredibly timely because there are some EEOC and some Affordable Care Act and everything, some implications. I will try not to be too legally with you. I'll be gentle, but between the time that I began preparing this webinar and today, the EEOC announced some new rulings, so I've tried to integrate some of that stuff into the webinar today. So hopefully you'll be in for an unbelievable thrill ride, and we'll just have a great time. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. I'd like to review where we're going today. First of all, here are the objectives. We want to talk about how to integrate biometric screening data, how to, and I'm going to spend most of the time in the webinar on that one single topic, but there are some other things that you'll wonder about: how to secure biometric data, doing biometrics on a budget. In other words, if you had to use just one biometric measure, what would you use if money was tight? Maybe if you had money, how many would you, which one would you do if you had to do two? So we'll go over that, and then we'll talk about recommended biometric screening schedule. Again, I'm going to spend most of the time on the first point, so let's just dive right in. All right, so this boulder perched at the top of the hill here is chronic disease. With the slightest nudge, we know that this boulder will thunder downhill, crushing everything in its path. Everything in its wake will be smashed to smithereens. In fact, it is probably thundering downhill as we speak. Chronic disease is without question the biggest major health threat, and it is one of the biggest economic threats to corporate America today. I truly believe that. So to set the frame of reference for our discussion about biometric screening, I think it's really important for me to review the big picture. So what is the goal of wellness programs? Well, one goal, probably the biggest goal, is to reduce employee-related costs. It's probably the goal for most companies who offer wellness programs. And it may sound like I'm talking about healthcare costs, but really what I'm saying is it's much broader than that. Employee-related costs includes that, but it also includes productivity, absenteeism, morale, the influence of culture on all of which will have financial implications. So this raises a great question. What is driving cost? Well, the main driver of cost is chronic disease. There's absolutely no question about it. Chronic disease, just for those of you who are wondering, includes things like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and I will say some cancers, etc. There's a few other things, but for example, if we're just going to look at one chronic disease, diabetes, what I want you to do is watch what happens in the United States for a short year period. Now, this map shows county level data for the incidence of diabetes among U.S. adults in 2005. I'm also going to show you 2000 and 2009. A lighter color means fewer cases, and darker means more cases of diabetes among adults. So watch what happens in 4 short years. Keep one eye on your county, wherever it is that you live. So you want to dial it in, figure out where it is, and then keep the other eye on the southeast part of the United States where this problem is most pronounced. So 2005, 2007, and 2009. Is that just stunning and staggering? To me, it blows me away. So the main driver of chronic healthcare costs and everything else is chronic disease. Now, this according to the CDC. So this raises a natural question: what is driving chronic disease? Well, here's the deal: it is unhealthy lifestyle. There's absolutely no question that an unhealthy lifestyle is a driver in all of this. For example, let me just show you this. Based on 3 epidemiological studies published from the Nurses' Health Study, we know that I'm giving a little, here we go. Chronic disease is caused by unhealthy lifestyle. And we also know that chronic disease is prevented by unhealthy lifestyle. So look at the orange bars from the Nurses' Health Study. We know that unhealthy lifestyle causes disease. These big 4 chronic diseases, stroke, cancers, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes are 70 to 91% attributable to unhealthy lifestyle. 70 to 91%. From other epidemiological studies, we know that healthy lifestyle prevents chronic disease. So look at the green bars, they're going down. In this study from Germany, the exercising, healthy eating, non-smoking, healthy weight participants, I'll say that again, the exercising, healthy eating, non-smoking, healthy weight participants were 38 to 91% less likely to get these same 4 chronic diseases in an 8-year follow-up. Now, with that, let me issue a mild tangent alert. Here's why. In a recent webinar, Dr. Aldana cited the same evidence from the Nurses' Health Study, and we often do. It's an important part of our business case. But specifically, like me, he mentioned 3 papers published in 2000 and 2001. During this webinar, 3 people submitted the identical question at the same time. It was almost as if they had been primed or prepared. I will say I think are innovators in wellness webinars. We've been doing it for a long time, and I can only think of 2 times when even 2 people asked the same question during an entire webinar, and it didn't happen at the same time. So the statistical odds of that happening were just It's really, for me, mind-blowing. So here's the question that they asked. They said, do you have any more recent references to support your claim that lifestyle influences chronic disease? This tells me that someone who does not understand epidemiology is spreading false doctrine about the shelf life of epidemiological evidence. So please humor me for a moment while I make a point. What I want you to do, I just want you to answer true or false to this question. Humor me, please. True or false to this question? Smoking causes cancer. Wow. Okay, we've got about 2/3 of you have voted. 70% have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I'm going to share the results. 87% of you said true. Good job. 13% of you said false. I'm not sure whether you're smokers or whether you, I don't mean to offend you, but we've known this for a while, folks. So the U.S. Surgeon General in 1964 concluded that smoking causes cancer based on a huge body of evidence. And I will say the scientific evidence in that report was mostly generated in the 1940s and 1950s. However, if you carefully examine the references in the Surgeon General's report from 1964, you will see that there are two references from the 1800s, one as early as 1830. So this raises a question. I'm going to hide those results. Is it appropriate to say that smoking causes cancer when the citation year for this report is 1964? And the science on which the report is based is mostly from the 40s and 50s. Now, the 13% of you who said smoking doesn't cause cancer, maybe you're of that belief. I'm not really sure. What do you think? Should those of us who actually have produced, conducted, and published peer-reviewed evidence, should we be required to reestablish this scientific fact? If so, how often should we be forced to do this? Every 20 years, 10 years? Every 5 years? Do you see the point? There's a truth inherent in epidemiology that I think a lot of people miss. So I want to thank you for tolerating this mild tangent, but if you're troubled by the year citation for modern day epidemiological evidence, let me just say it is highly likely that you are listening to voices that are not trained. And I'm happy to recommend this free course from Coursera on the principles of epidemiology. I encourage those of you who want to know more about epidemiology just to take a look at that. Thank you for tolerating that mild tangent. Yes, Steve.
Troy?
Yeah.
Troy, I'm going to interrupt you a second. Your screen, once you went to the poll and came back, is now giving us just a partial screen. We can't quite see your full slides. I don't know if you need to just refresh it or open it up again, do something. We're only seeing part of your screen.
How's that?
Again, it's the same thing. We're seeing just about a fourth of your screenshot. Maybe just make me a presenter for just a brief moment and then take it back again.
Okay. See, this is what I get for going on a mild rant.
Yeah, right. Go ahead and just make me a presenter for just a split moment. See if we can't get your system to reset, and then take it back.
Okay, we will do that. Anyway,
I can do it if you want.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you here on the list, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm listed in here. Let's see. I apologize for this. Yeah, now Troy, go back to your screen. No, okay, I'm going to transfer it to me. Now, Troy, if you want to take it back. Hopefully this will solve our little problem. Everybody will be able to see everything that you're doing.
Should you go ahead and get back to me? On my list, I'm not showing either you. Oh, here we go. Here we go. We're way down here at the bottom.
Go ahead and take it back. There you go. Now go ahead and show your slides. Ah, that's better. Sorry for that interruption, but everybody was noticing the same thing. Perfect.
All right. Well, you got to live through the joys of dealing with technology that I get every single day. Thank you for tolerating that. So let's go ahead and start on this topic, how to integrate biometric data. First, I want to start with kind of a case study on how not to integrate biometric data. Again, this is what not to do. This goes back to what Steve was saying earlier about the company that he was dealing with. So here's what not to do. Use biometric data to establish a health factor-based standard that must be met by the employee to qualify for a reward. Meaning, for example, that your cholesterol must be under 200 or you have to pay more, a greater premium, etc. But do this and offer no programs to help them get there. Again, this is what not to do. This is a little bit like telling an employee to prepare a business report without a desk or a computer or a printer or even paper. It's impossible to do unless they went back somehow to the Stone Ages and got a chisel and a rock. It's just impossible. Or maybe like telling a child to get good grades but providing no school, classroom, teacher, or books. Actually, what I'm suggesting as a bad idea is technically illegal because I am halfway to my Juris Doctorate. But you might be surprised by the number of companies and brokers who think that this is both a good, I would say good and original idea. And let me say for the record, it is neither. If you're considering the use of biometric data to set a health standard that must be met, I sincerely hope that your first several planning meetings are devoted to figuring out ways to help all employees meet the standard, whatever it happens to be. I'm one of those people that believes if employers gave more thought about helping employees have better, healthier lives, instead of catching them doing something wrong, that we would all be better off. So this is how not to do it. Please don't do that. Here is, I'm going to give you several examples of how to integrate biometric data. Here's one way to do it. Use the data to auto-answer biometric-based questions on a personal health assessment or a personal PHA. Let me show you how this might work. So an employee completes PHA. They get to this question, they answer normal. Boom. But let's say that the employee really has blood pressure that's 130/88. Now it's not healthy, but they don't remember it that way. If we can preload the data like this before the user takes PHA, then they could be reminded of their PHA value or their value on that question. Blood pressure was 130/88. This question has already been answered for you. Then we would have more accurate data. See, we're borderline instead of normal. This is something that we recognize is really, really important. So we do this for our customers. Some of you are wondering, well, what happens if the user takes the personal health assessment first and the biometric data is provided later? This happens a lot. So we can also upload biometric data after the PHA has been completed. And what happens in that case, the biometric data or the objective biometric data just overwrites the self-reported response. And so the wellness team that we're working with, they know that the reports we give them are based on objective data. Very, very important. It was not horribly difficult to do. Being able to integrate biometric data in this way is hugely important for a couple of reasons. First of all, you get more accurate data. For example, we know that the ratio of self-report to biometric data in our system, the WellStep system, is about 75% self-report and about 25% biometric data. So about 3 to 1. So here you see the percent healthy blood pressure based on self-reported measures from year 1 to year 3. See down there at the bottom, it's year 1, year 3. And so that line is going in the correct direction. We're getting healthier, and that's good. But compare this line to the percent healthy based on objective biometric data. Boink, way down there. So about 50 percentage points different. It turns out that people tend to overestimate their own good health. This is common in all facets of life. Now, if there's any good news in this, it is that the percent healthy increases in both cases. We're happy about that. You'll notice that if you look carefully, the improvement is actually a little bit better for the biometric data, which leads me to my next point. about the advantages of doing this. Second good reason is objective data allows for more effective evaluation. So this is from a paper based on WellStep's customer. Here we're just looking at the employees who had elevated blood pressure at baseline compared to 12 months and 24 months follow-up. So you can see that the percentage of those with elevated blood pressure was cut in half from baseline to 24 months. That's pretty huge. Now, we would not have been able to document this improvement had we not integrated the data. Another example of basically the same thing. This is another paper with another customer to support the same point. Now, here we're just looking at the number of employees who were at high risk at baseline for a variety of different things and what happened after 12 months. So the number with high systolic blood pressure decreased nearly 4%, with diastolic blood pressure nearly 9%, and those with high blood glucose decreased about 7.5%. By the way, you might be interested to know the number of those who actually had diabetes decreased 27%. I've not shown that here. Finally, those with high cholesterol decreased by nearly 15%. Again, accuracy of the data and better evaluation are both huge benefits of auto integration of biometric data with the personal health assessment. It's just one way. So here's another way that biometric data can be integrated. Offer the right tools to help employees improve health, which will show up in biometric numbers. It'll show up in your evaluation data. Here's an example. We, like some other of our friends in the industry, we build custom activity tracker for each of our customers. And this tracker has their wellness activities, their point structure, prize level. It's all customizable. It's called rewards. So we can use rewards, and often do, to encourage participation in screening, or to provide any information about anything related to screening, such as where to go, how to prepare, what to expect when you get there, how to interpret the results. You get the idea. And we can provide this information in several different formats. So what it does is it just sort of marries the biometric screening process to the rest of your wellness program in a really seamless way. You might also wonder, we can also ask users to indicate whether or not they met a biometric standard. If a company wants to do that, we can sure help them. We provide an easy method for users to upload what is needed to verify their self-reported, whether or not they met whatever the standard happens to be. And by customer request, we even created a little tool to communicate completion of program requirements where applicable. And this is kind of cool because if you look at it, it says, well, if I want the wellness plan, I've completed the personal health assessment, but the biometric data hasn't been received because I don't have a check mark there. So it says not done, click here. It gives company specific directions on what to do, who to contact, where to go, how to schedule the appointment, how to get the data done. We can do that on a company by company basis. So that's another really cool thing. So one more example. We've noticed that this tool helps employees improve health. It's called My Tracker. People these days seem to like tracking their own stuff. I call it, I don't know, generation wearable. We think it's especially important to allow individuals to track the behaviors that are most likely to improve health, like eating, exercise, and so forth. So now these aren't biometric data per se, but it is another example of how to integrate data in a wellness program. So one last example of how to integrate data. This is the last example. Integrating data allows for intervention and assessment at the individual level. So you can document individual improvement versus a health standard if that's part of your program. I would not recommend that in every case, but if it's part of your program, you can certainly do it this way. So for example, maybe an employee has glucose that is too high, so they get referred to health coaching to help them make some lifestyle changes. This practice has been negatively spun by vocal critics of wellness. You've heard some of them. And I will say, rightly so, that they've criticized when we get the implementation process wrong, which we too often do. WellSteps, I'm saying the wellness industry. When we make wellness too punitive or invasive, we're not helping anything. We just go on record by saying that. But when done right, I've been doing this a long time, and I will say I have seen this approach improve health in a lot of cases by motivating employees to lose weight. I have a good friend who lives around the corner who lost 45 pounds because a caring health coach called him and said, I just want to talk to you. And they talked through what BMI meant, and that motivated him. And he lost weight, and he's kept it off for several years. Lose weight, change exercise, eating behaviors, quit smoking, and so forth. In most cases, though, I will say that when this is successful, there's been a gradual rollout. There has been substantial employee input during the process. And if we're talking about behavior change, we're working mostly with those who are ready to change. Some of you out there are of the opinion that it makes a lot of sense to call or contact all the people who are high risk, assuming that they're high risk and they must want to change. Think about it. You must know somebody who is high risk and not ready to change. Think about how fruitless it is at family get-togethers when you try to tell Uncle Lou that he needs to change his eating habits. He's not listening. He's turning his hearing aid off. He's not going to hear a thing that you say. And we do the same thing when we chase people around in a work environment. Let's not waste our time and resources chasing down those people. Let's just instead wait until they're ready to change and help them be healthier by changing the culture and making it healthier. Okay, getting off the soapbox. So as a side note, this approach is always more successful in positive cultures with high trust. That speaks to itself. So we can learn a lot from successful implementation of tobacco policy. That's been going on a lot longer than this outcomes-based stuff. So there's a community college in Arizona, for example. I can't remember the exact process they went through, but I know they took 5 years to fully implement a tobacco policy. Great effort was taken not to ramrod the policy down the throat of employees, and eventually it was very well received and supported because they did these things. It was gradual. They had employee input, and so forth. So all of this may raise a major question, and if it doesn't, then you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in our industry today. So, okay, Dr. Adams, you just described a health contingent or outcomes-based approach, and I did on the previous slide. What about all these lawsuits I keep hearing about? I'm freaked out about this. As I was preparing this, I thought you might appreciate a little brief update on the recently released proposed EEOC rules in language we could all understand. So, by way of background, the Affordable Care Act, which all of you have heard of, I'm just going to call that the ACA, basically prohibited a wellness program from being used as a means to discriminate. It's all about being fair. The ACA said, okay, we'll do wellness programs, but let's be fair about it. I'm going to refer you to a webinar that we did back in September of 2013. It's in our archive section on our webinars page. If you go to wellsteps.com, click on webinars, scroll down, you'll get to an archive. There's a webinar there entitled Wellness and the ACA, What You Need to Know. In this webinar, we talk all about a lot of this in great detail. I'm not going to rehash all of that, but what about this lawsuit? So the ACA rules, here's a little background. The ACA rules were supposed to protect employees, and they have to a great extent. We all thought that if we stayed legal by following the ACA rules, that companies and wellness programs would also be protected from legal action. Not so fast, my friend. The EEOC has filed not one, not two, but 3 lawsuits against wellness program. What the heck is going on? Now, you should know, 2 were against companies that required employees to pay 100% of their health care unless they participated in a wellness program. That's a violation of ACA even. I'll tell you why in a second. And the 3rd required employees to bear what the suit called a substantial financial burden, which was about $2,000 each unless they were compliant with or participated in a wellness program. So the main argument by the EEOC, to keep this simple, was that these wellness programs were in violation of the American with Disabilities Act for a lot of reasons, and then some other federal laws. So as you can imagine, these lawsuits have created some confusion because companies being sued were complying with the law under ACA and HIPAA. I will say, thankfully, the EEOC has recently clarified its position just about a week ago. This is not yet law. So I'm not talking about law. There's going to be some changes, but these are accepting public comment through mid-June, but the law probably won't change that much. So let me review a few of the finer points. Just to get on board here with what the ACA is all about. The ACA, when the ACA uses the language reward, it's talking about either an incentive, so gift card, or a penalty, a premium discount. They call that, if you don't participate and you get charged the normal rate, they call that a penalty. But in the ACA language, that's just a reward, just to make things simple. There's three kinds of programs: a participatory, no reward, or reward-based is not based on meeting a health factor. Activity only, you got to do an activity related to health factor, and health contingent, you got to meet a health standard. That's stopping smoking or achieving a biometric number. And for our purpose today, we're really concerned about participatory and health contingent. We really won't discuss this. It's just muddies the waters, if anything. Okay, so again, you can go back to that previous webinar if you want to know more about those two topics. So the EEOC program rules. Number one, they apply to programs that are part of a group health plan. What in the heck does that mean? In a case against Broward County, a judge ruled that a wellness program was part of a group health plan because, I found this surprising, they were communicated and marketed in the same brochure. In other words, a health plan produced a brochure they gave to their employees every year, and they talked about the wellness program, so boom, that made them part of the health plan. Also, if you use any type of benefits-based incentive, you do lower premiums or co-pays for wellness participation, then bam, I would say that your program is part of the health plan. So that's the first thing. Most of us aren't going to have a problem with that. Number two, it must be designed to promote health or prevent disease. It says specifically the wellness program must be reasonably designed to promote health or prevent disease. Another way of saying this, think about it, is when do the rewards of wellness program make participation involuntary or make it so that the employee can't afford not to participate? They're giving away so much money that it's really not voluntary anymore. I really don't know. I think the legal system is going to have to figure that out. I will go over a couple things though. Reasonably designed, they say, means that the program can't have three things. Can't be overly burdensome in terms of time requirements. And I think that's, I don't know, they haven't defined that, but I would say it's an hour, maybe hour and a half a day. I think there's no legal precedent for that, but that's just my guess. They can't, number two, require unreasonably intrusive procedures. And number three, they can't place significant cost on the employee. Further, promoting health or preventing disease means the evidence has to be here. For example, the case that I've used once and Steve used right at the beginning, collecting biometric data with no follow-up is just collecting data and would not reasonably promote health. So again, if you're doing that or you think it's a good idea, please don't. The third point, and this is new, this is why it's italicized, the EEOC program proposed program rules apply to health contingent programs. Those are ones that require the employee to meet a health factor-based standard. You got to have this blood pressure, you got to get this blood cholesterol, you have to be this BMI, etc. That's health contingent. But it also applies, unlike the Affordable Care Act, ACA, to participatory programs that include HRAs or biometric screens. You want to note this. So the proposed EEO program rules, just like the ACA rules, apply to health contingent programs, but they also apply to participatory programs if there's an HRA or PHA or biometric screens included. That's pretty interesting. So fourth, they can't deny or limit health coverage for non-participants. They can charge different amounts with premium deductibles or copay deductible changes in copays, but they can't limit the coverage. They can't say, for example, well, if you're in the wellness program, you can come to the on-site physical therapy clinic, but if you're not a wellness participant, you're not allowed. That's changing coverage. You can't do that. It's against the law. If medical information is collected, you got to provide notice, and there's some specific recommendations on what needs to be included in the notice. We'll save that for another time. So these are the proposed EEO program rules. What are the incentive rules? There really are three. First is the same as ACA. You're used to this. Allow up to 30% of employee-only coverage. So people get confused on this. It's sort of to make everything fair. Let's say you're an employee only, you work for a company. The person who works next to you and the next girl has a picture of their 8 children. They've got the big Suburban in the back with the silhouettes of the mom and the dad and 8 kids on the back. Well, to make it fair, what they did, they say, okay, it's 30% of the employee only coverage. That's both in the Affordable Care Act and in this EEOC recommended rules. 30% of the employee only coverage. So if it's $10,000, no matter who pays what, the employee or the company, the reward must be $3,000 or less. Now, we don't have a problem with the incentive part of this. Nobody is giving out $3,000 worth of gift cards. It's just not happening. It's on the penalty side where we're having problems. We got to be careful about charging employees too much for the premium differential, et cetera, and so on. If it's more than $3,000, they say that makes it against the law. At that point, it's no longer voluntarily. Again, this is the second thing is tobacco cessation incentive of 50% when self-reported. That's pretty much the same as the ACA rules, but this is different. When according to the EEOC, there is any test conducted for tobacco use or nicotine, for example, if you look at serum cotinine, it's a common metabolite of nicotine, then it's no longer the 50% number. It reverts to the 30% ADA max. So if your wellness program includes any type of testing for any metabolite of nicotine, any other way of testing metabolically, they call this a medical test for tobacco, then your limit is the 30% ADA max. Again, this is not going to be a problem for hardly anybody, but you just may want to be aware of this. I believe this is probably where the first legal tests are going to come because this is different. Really quickly on the EEOC security rules. This is snooze fest for sure. So I'm going to go through these really quickly. You got to follow the HIPAA privacy, security, and breach rules. Well, what are those, Dr. Adams? I'm not going to go over those. I did already. If you have any questions, you can call us. You can also Google HIPAA privacy, security, and breach rules. You can probably download a copy, about 10 pages. You can kind of get that. Privacy policies on collection, storage, and disclosure has to do with how you get it, where you keep it, how secure that is, and who you share the data with. This is a big deal. We just did this recently as part of routine practice, internal assessment of security and privacy standard. That means you look at your internal practices of data sharing and how your security practices, whether everything's up to date, how you're preventing hack attacks, et cetera, and so on. That's a big deal. And then we've been recommending this for a long time, so I thought it was great that these came out in the EEO security rules. They said, it's probably a really good idea if you use a third-party vendor to reduce security risk, because that way someone else is holding all your data. Well, if you don't do that, make sure that you have that you separate the wellness program personnel from those who make employee-related decisions. So the employee can't come back and say, I did not get that promotion or I didn't get that pay raise because the wellness people shared my data with the employee decision-making people, and I've been discriminated against because I've got high cholesterol or what have you. So make a huge internal firewall if you decide that you want to accomplish both functions. So just really quickly, some of the comments that they're taking EEO questions on. They're not really sure about how do they protect low-income employees. What about those people who go get a doctor's note? We had a customer once who there was one employee in this customer who got a doctor's note. The doctor said it is medically inadvisable that my patient quit smoking. Never heard of that before, but okay. So the question is, do doctor's note participants, did they get the same financial deal? That's something the EEOC is kind of wondering about. Do they prohibit penalties that make insurance unaffordable, meeting that unaffordability test in the ACA? I think it's 9.56%. And there are several other public questions. If you're so inclined, feel free to go there and ask questions. Now, all of this is nice. It's a really nice segue to the next topic, which is Okay, we've got these data. How do we secure it? What do we do? I want to refer you to the go to wellsteps.com slash the webinars page. It's off our main page. Scroll down to the archives, and this webinar has already been archived. Right below the slides, you'll see a security checklist. The security checklist includes broken out items from these 4 points I'm going to share with you. Some additional points that you may want to download. So I'm not going to spend very much time on this, but just as a baseline, if you've got secure data, they want to find out if you've got a privacy officer, somebody who looks after the privacy side of your operations. Do you have a security team? Do you have cyber insurance? That's a new thing, but we get asked that a lot in RFPs. Do you use best practice web security standards? And again, these are all broken out in the PDF I provided for you. Do you have a security plan that is regularly updated and run? Do you update this? Do you do this? Do you test for that? Do you do penetration testing? That means finding out if people from the outside can hack in. And then is there regular security training for employees? These are just 4 things that you need to be concerned about. Again, I'm going to refer you to that PDF. Jumping on to the next topic, which screening is best? If you had to use just one biometric screening measure because you had limited budget or you had limited time, which one would you use? Well, I am going to say that if for my money, I would use blood pressure, and it's not even close. It's not even close. The reason why is because if you look at the chronic disease risks, those are the things that are driving cost. Blood pressure is a primary risk factor. Is it a causative agent of these 3? Heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. You can leave cancers off of that list. It is a fundamental driver of heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. So I would measure blood pressure. In fact, the United States Preventative Services Task Force guideline says you should measure blood pressure at least once a year. And it is driven by obesity and tobacco use. So if you can help employees become less obese and stop using tobacco, it will have a direct impact on their blood pressure. You could probably add another line out there with physical activity and healthy eating that will change obesity, which will change blood pressure. These are all things that are highly, I'm going to invent a word, intervenable. You can do something about these things. So here's another reason, a couple of other reasons why. About 1/3 of the U.S. population have high blood pressure, and about 85% of these people, they don't even know it. It causes huge problems, and we don't even know about it. Excuse me. About 1/3 have borderline high blood pressure. Health blood pressure screening, high blood pressure screening, is a 5-star intervention. There were a series of reviews about a decade and a half ago. I believe they've been updated, where they looked at 13 different interventions that are done at the corporate level, and they were rated on a scale of 1 to 5. And they used really fancy words, but I just call them 1-star to 5-star. High blood pressure screening was the only one of the 13 that ranked 5 stars out of 5. So it's a highly effective screening intervention. It's simple, it's inexpensive. It's a lifestyle prescription, reverses the problem, is well documented. There's really no reason why. Yeah, so the cure for high blood pressure is diet, exercise, and no tobacco. And the most important reason why, if you're inclined to use any type of health contingent program, I would say that high blood pressure is what you have versus what you are. This goes back to being nice. If you use body mass index or any measure of body composition, you position yourself as a broker or employer of telling people that they're fat. Nobody wants to do that, and nobody wants to hear that. Let's stop doing it. As wellness people, let's focus on things that people can change. Let's talk about high blood pressure. It's what you have versus what you are. So this is what I would use. Now, if I were here's another great reason to focus on high blood pressure. This is from the Joint National Commission on Prevention, Detection, and Evaluation of High Blood Pressure. This is the 3rd iteration of this. Another great reason to focus on blood pressure. Look at the first thing listed on their recommended type of intervention: lifestyle modification. Lifestyle modification is exactly what we're talking about. This is their recommended treatment for high blood pressure. Now, I will say honestly, most medical professionals do this. They just skip right to the initial drugs, but this should give us a lot of hope, right? Lifestyle modification. And then one additional reason why this is so huge, this is the impact of reducing high blood pressure. I kind of put this on a graph so you can see it. The impact of reducing high blood pressure by 1 millimeter of mercury is how you measure it. That's in green. 1 millimeter of mercury reduces risk of cardiovascular disease by 2% and reduces risk of stroke by about 3%. So reduce it 2, 3, 4, you get the idea. You can have a substantial impact on 2 huge health problems, chronic diseases, by reducing blood pressure. So I think I've beat the blood pressure drum long enough. I will say if I were pushed a little bit to come up with the second one, I probably would recommend blood glucose. A lot of people would say, oh, I'm surprised you didn't recommend cholesterol. But blood glucose is it's associated with a horrible. You remember the slide I showed you that said lifestyle is implicated in 91% of chronic disease? It's both. It prevents and it causes to the degree of 91%. It's diabetes. It's very costly. It's one of the most costly things that we are experiencing right now. So I would use blood glucose. That's just my personal opinion. Okay, so the last point, and we have a little bit of time for questions. How often should you conduct blood pressure screening? Short answer, really depends on what you measure. If you just include blood pressure, as I've recommended, the recommendation is every year. So conduct a screening every year. But if you use any blood measures, I'll say, I don't know why we do it every year, but they're rarely recommended by the smartest people in America looking at this. They're rarely recommended annually. Blood measures are rarely recommended annually. Again, by the United States Preventive Services Task Force. I've been asked several times by many different people to make some evidence-based screening recommendations. I'm going to share these with you really quickly. If you download these slides and put it in slideshow mode and you click on these links, they'll actually take you to the copies of the recommendations that I'm including here, if you really, really want to know. So these recommendations are from evidence-based guidelines and balance two things: the effectiveness of early detection and treatment and the economy of doing so. A lot of people ignore that second part, but so they say annually assess risk. That's with a health risk appraisal, blood pressure, and body mass index. And then I put in there combined age and sex to recommend other things, because if you're a certain age and gender, then you should do this. If you're a certain age and gender and you have a risk for this, you should do this other thing. So annually, you should do these things. And then when indicated, you notice how this is A, B, C, D, E. This shows you my OCD side. But if when indicated, cancer screening, mammography for women 50 and over, diabetes screening, elevated lipid screening, you can see the recommendations there. I won't try to explain those. But if you're conducting annual biometric screenings, I'm going to suggest one more time, you should maybe reconsider how you're spending your wellness budget. It is not recommended that an entire employee population be screened every year. And forgive me for this in-your-face example here. But if you looked at this picture right here, who needs breast cancer screening? You know, it just seems obvious. Breast cancer screening should be just for the females. But if you're screening everyone who has any risk, you should also screen that guy. Because in 2015, just under 2,400 men will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and 1 in 5 of those will die. That's horrible to say. Remember, screening recommendations are based on the effectiveness of early detection and treatment and on the economy of doing so. This is a horribly difficult thing to say to this guy who maybe has a risk of breast cancer, but that's what the guidelines state. So here's a simple case study from the farming industry. 155 employees in the farming industry. They had a total annual wellness budget of $6,200. They decided they were going to do a biometric screening. They spent $4,000 on that, and 52% of the employees participated. Here's what they learned. Their average cholesterol was 168. That's low. Average glucose was 90. That's also low. Average blood pressure was 126 over 81. Average BMI of 96. If you let's look at this. Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but let's review what we learned. 0 employees screened were at risk for high blood pressure or glucose. So we would never do anything with those anyway. In this case, screening will motivate no one to change those behaviors anyway, because those two screens, while they show that what they're doing now, the Twinkie that I'm eating and the Coke I'm drinking is working. Look, I've got low blood cholesterol. I've got low blood glucose. In fact, it may motivate continued unhealthy behavior. That's why I think it's always a good idea to use the evidence-based guidelines to recommend these blood measures. Average BMI really doesn't tell you much. Blood pressure, if anything, is just marginally at risk. So what do you really do with this information? We know nothing about half the population who may very well be the high risk, right? And the worst thing is we only have $2,200 left for the rest of the year to do wellness programming. We blew 2/3 of the budget on screening. We could have learned probably just as much by just doing blood pressure screening. I've heard these types of comments from companies just like this. We wish we would have thought this through before committing so much money to screening. So that's what I'm hoping to help you do. My goal is to help us think all of this through. Let me drop just a few truth bombs on you. In closing here, screening is costly. I'm not against it, but it's very costly. The cost of risk is nearly always greater than the possible savings. So it's impossible, if you're concerned about ROI, it's impossible to get an ROI out of screening almost all the time. This makes the economics, if you think about it, of mass biometric screening very difficult. For example, let's say you screen for a risk that is present in 10 out of 100 people. Then the cost of 90 screenings who are going to be negative is invested to access the potential savings that's locked up in those 10 people. And remember, just by telling those 10 people that they have high risk is not necessarily going to motivate them to change. So, and then final thought, drugs can mask risk and delay behavior change. So I encourage you to think through this carefully. So just in summary, there are several ways that biometric data can be integrated into a wellness program. We went over several. I mentioned integration with personal health assessment and employee behavior change tools, just to name a few. And I also mentioned biometric data can be beneficial in evaluation. I showed you a couple examples of that. We talked briefly about securing data. I'm going to one more time going to refer you to the PDF that we prepared to help you think through some of the ways to secure data. It's becoming a growing problem. Also, based on the evidence, blood pressure screening was recommended as the one screen to use every year, especially if money is tight. Finally, the frequency of screenings is dictated by what you include. Blood measures for the bulk of the population are not indicated every year, but there are tools out there, including one that we developed called Screening Reminder, that will take the employee's information and will make recommendations on the screenings they need based on their age and their gender, to help all of this be more seamless. So I've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We don't have all that much time left for questions, but Stephen, I'm guessing that we do have some questions.
Yeah, we do, Troy. Kim wants to know if you would recommend that an employer have a blood pressure cuff at a work site for employees to use whenever they want.
A blood pressure kiosk?
Yeah, or a cuff. She just says a cuff, but it could be your questions regarding a kiosk or a station. What do you recommend?
It's good, better, best. Best would be a trained professional measuring blood pressure and providing information on blood pressure values and what to do to change them. That would be best, but I would say somewhere between good and better is providing a station where employees can stop themselves and measure their own blood pressure, and maybe there's some information there. There's interesting evidence on the USPSTF guidelines about that very thing. So I think that's definitely a great idea.
One of the listeners is a consultant, and she's been working with a group. They have gathered biometric data. She, the consultant, has access to the data set, And she also knows that the director of HR and someone up above her also has access to the individual data set. I mean, based on what you've said, this is a bad deal for them. But I mean, how do you recommend it? What do you tell this consultant?
Well, I would say to go back to your customer and let them know that they're at legal risk. And legal risk is exactly that. It's just risk. Nothing's going to happen unless somebody decides to sue. But if they do decide to sue, I doubt that a court of law is going to be very happy about the fact that the director of HR, who's making employee-related decisions, has access to that information. I would recommend that they change that as a consultant, based on what I've said about the EEO guidelines, especially.
Randy wants to know, do you recommend having them do their biometric screening at work or encourage them to go to their own providers?
A lot of that depends on it's a number economy of scale. If you've got enough people, most of the vendors will require you to have 35 to 40 people on one site to make it cost effective for them to come and screen you. If you can do that, it's a lot more convenient for the employee, assuming that you set up very private cubicles for employees to be screened. You set up a private office for the results to be discussed. If you can manage all those privacy and security issues, you're better off doing it at work because it's more convenient. Absent that, we know lots of customers. We've helped lots of customers come up with ways of sending people to their doctor or to some of the walk-in cleaning screening facilities that you could go to. Quest Laboratories, for example, you can walk in, get your data, and you can provide that. So I always think it's best to do it on site if you can manage the process and the privacy at the same time.
Um, uh, One of our listeners had a question here. I got to pull it back up again because it slipped away from me. He says, your argument is that high blood pressure is so prevalent that it makes good sense to screen it. But why not use BMI as the same health indicator? It's easy to measure. Why not BMI instead of blood pressure? Is blood pressure really a better, if you're going to measure one inexpensive thing, why not BMI?
Well, if you're using that argument, why not do the inexpensive thing? Why not both? Because I would say BMI, all it requires is a scale. Blood pressure just requires a stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, maybe two blood pressure cuffs. One for normal sized people, one for people who are a little larger, and somebody who's marginally trained on how to use a blood pressure cuff. You're better off collecting both. That's why on that slide where I recommended annual screenings, I put BMI and blood pressure on one line. That I would recommend both. But if I only had to use one, I probably would use blood pressure because, again, obesity drives blood pressure.
Yeah, Gabrielle wants to know, is there ever a time when you would recommend doing a full screening? I mean, height, weight, BMI, circumference, lipid profile, glucose, CRP, I mean, the whole shebang. Is there ever a time that you would have them do the whole thing?
Yeah, in an annual physical paid for by Obamacare. I'm about ready to leave and go get one of those myself here in a little bit. That's the time and place for that. It's a costly. It's all covered under Obamacare. There is absolutely no reason for us to pay for that as employers when it's provided elsewhere. And I'm going to say free. Those of you who know me well know that's a loaded question. There really is no reason for that. I am arguing against unnecessary screening, and I think that doing it every year at the work site, doing the whole shebang is not necessary. That money could be better invested elsewhere, like helping people improve their health.
There's one quick question about the 30% incentive is now based on employee coverage instead of family coverage. I know you didn't talk about that in depth, but that's a bit of a change.
Well, I didn't. I don't know that. I thought it was a change, but I'm sorry I cut you off, Steve. But we're just pretty close to running out of time here. I thought that was a change as well. I went back and looked carefully at the Affordable Care Act guidelines and compared those to the new or the proposed EEOC guidelines. And to me, it looks like they're the same. I can read those again, but it looks like it is 30% of employee-only coverage in both cases. I could be wrong, but that's what it looks like to me.
Okay. Uh, Troy, there's lots of other questions here. We're not going to get to all of them. We've kind of covered as many as we can. We appreciate your help in all of this. We're going to do a really deep dive under the WellSteps hood, how the WellSteps system really works to change behaviors next month in May. We encourage you all to take a look at that next webinar. We want to thank you all for coming, and thank you, Troy, for your time. And I know a lot of work goes into putting these together. Yeah, you'll get a brief survey right after this. If you don't like things in our webinars, and the things you do like, things you want to hear about, let us know. And we'll see you all again in a month. Thank you.